All right, I'm going to try to get everybody in here. One of the things we like to do is provide networking and food and beer, and then, you know, nobody wants to actually come listen. They just want to chat and eat and drink. So we're going to get started here in a few minutes. I'm trying to corral people, but you know. We got a beer on it. Keep fresh.
I think below the table is probably wise.
Put it right there for the focus. All right. Well, thanks everyone for your patience. We were letting everyone hang out, and it was good chit chat and networking. And these guys told me they needed a beer or two before they got started, so that's a prerequisite of coming for them. So
We work cheap.
yeah, I know. That's it. So welcome everyone to the Berkshire Innovation Center. I'm Ben Sosny. I get to be the director here and do fun stuff like this, which is always a pleasure. We have, you know, the BIC was built as to be a real connector and convener between industry, government, and academia. And that's where stuff really gets cooking. We have a lot of great examples over the last few years of that happening here, but you know, it's hard to find one better than this. It's really come to fruition where we have amazing research going on at such an anchor institution in Western Mass, a growing company that you know, built a division here and is just exploding quicker than we can handle them. We've been moving EMA to different parts of this building to try to contain them. And our partners in government who are seeing an opportunity to create real, you know, clusters of economic development, which is what Pat Larkin and MassTech are so focused on. One of the things they're focused on. So it's happening with this project really symbolizes that partnership just in action. Government, academia, and industry working together to drive economic development. So you're going to see that. I don't need to spell it out, but it's so great. So this is about, for me, like I said, as an economic development agency here and an organization working to grow opportunities in the Berkshires, we see such a tremendous opportunity taking a technology that's advancing really quickly, driving towards implementation to create a cluster here in Western Massachusetts, and what that means and all the components around the cluster. And these guys, you know, Justin, Jim, Pat as well, but they're really, you know, pioneers in this industry. And it's about Metalens technology, which we'll all learn about more tonight. But that has implications in so many industries, which is really exciting, and what that means for our region and the potential. So we're going to get into it. This is not a lecture. We have some professors here, but this is not a lecture. We're not doing, there's some great visuals on your side, because as you learn about this, it's nice to have these visuals, and I know Jim has some visuals, but this is not about a PowerPoint and sit and listen. This is really a conversation among stakeholders about what this is and how, as a community, we can come together and leverage it, and what the role for our academic partners like Berkshire Community College and Springfield Technical College are all here to sort of represent that industry, opportunities for industry, and again, the role of government to sort of get this flywheel spinning. So I'm gonna let each of our panelists introduce themselves, give a little background as to what they are, what their role is here, their interest in this, and then we'll flip back. So we'll do that in maybe 90 seconds, 2 minutes, a little bit about who you are, and then I'll flip back to you, Jim, to talk a little bit about the technology, and then I'll send it to you, Justin, and you can talk a little bit about the industry collaboration, and Pat, about how do we create that cluster in economic development. And I really want to think about the optics industry in statewide, what that looks like, and the potential for creating this hub here in Western Massachusetts. So thank you all for coming out. It's great to see this crowd here, and I know there's people who are new to this and learning about it, and people who are deep in this and excited that this is happening in their backyard. So let's spend just a minute or two introducing yourself, giving a little bit about your background. Let's start with you, Jim.
Sure. I'm Jim Watkins. I'm a professor of polymer science and engineering at UMass-Amherst. I also direct the Institute for Hierarchical Manufacturing. So in our group, we build nanostructures for devices. So in optics and energy and other applications. One of my former students, former postdoc and now CTO of the company, is here as well. He worked in the group for a number of years. And these particular innovations are surrounding metal lenses, and they were promising enough, and you'll hear more about them in a little bit, that we founded a company called Mirius Optics. And that's now up and running and fabricating the lenses for commercial purposes. So in our group, we've often thought about, not just doing science, we love science, but how we're going to convert that into technology that can be commercialized, right? So you have to think about that very early on in the process. And so initially we did that with a large federal center grant from the National Science Foundation called the Center for Hierarchical Manufacturing. That's where I met Pat. And Pat made some incredibly valuable strategic investments early on to help build out the facilities and help us reach out across, the aisle, across the table to industry and get industry to come in and take advantage of the innovation. So we don't go to Pat often, but when we do, we try to make it strategic. When we really see an opportunity to move a technology forward and one that can benefit the Commonwealth and economic development in the state. And as you know, lasers, optics, photonics, Massachusetts, right, just fits in beautifully. And then we met Justin at EMA and had a common interest in the technology and went back to Pat and said, time is now. Unfortunately, MTC agreed. And you'll hear about what we're doing in a little bit, and we'll come back again, Pat. Thank you very much, MTC, for this and making it possible, and the BIC for hosting.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for coming out. This is great. Justin, go ahead.
Cool. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out. My name is Justin McKennon. I'm a principal scientist here at EMA. I lead our Massachusetts operation out here. I'm our friendly neighborhood crazy scientist, I guess, as most people kind of view me. My role at EMA is to kind of chase new things. I'm very interested in not doing what we already know how to do. So I'm very motivated by stuff that would be cool if we could do it. That's kind of the way I would describe it. And EMA as a company, we develop commercial software products that we originally developed for our own use and then realized that these were pretty good and we started selling them. And we paired that with the ability to kind of become practicing electromagnetic effects experts. And so we've grown that domain very, very significantly, actually, in the last several years here. As a company, we've been around since the late 1970s. We did a lot of work in EMP growing up, through the Cold War and everything, and kind of pivoted to space and aerospace and saw a huge need when we first moved to Pittsfield here and the ability to test things that go to space. So we established SIRI out here with major support again from MTC and an M2I2 grant. And Brian's our lab manager. He's sitting over here. He thought he was going to get it off without getting mentioned, but he's right there. Everybody look at him. As far as the Metalens topic goes, I like commercializing things. I used to read Popular Mechanics as a kid, and it was a really cool magazine. And I always got really frustrated reading it because you read this thing that's going to cure AIDS, or it's a cure for cancer, or make it so people can run faster, and you just never hear about it ever again. And it's like, how do you get all of this government funding and not do anything with it? And I always said, if you're going to spend the money, why not spend it on something that you're going to commercialize? And it's not to say that you have to sell it and you have to make money, but if you make something and you can't get it in the hands of people that are going to use it, it's not really worth making. And So our role in this Metalens project, which we'll kind of cover through the conversation here, is, you know, if you can manufacture it, you have all the ideas and thoughts, and you come to UMass-Amherst and you manufacture it. Our way of answering the question is, how is it going to work where you're trying to use it? Is it going to work in space? Is it going to last for 25 years? If you're going to use it in tactical military gear, is it going to be reliable enough for you to put soldiers' lives at risk to rely on that technology? So to me, that's pretty motivating. I think it really ties the work that we're doing to the mission, and it makes it a pretty easy, you know, get out of bed and do your job kind of thing for us.
Thanks, Justin and Pat. You know, MTC's been referenced a few times as supporting big initiatives. I learned the other day, that's not surprisingly, that I was told by a colleague that all great innovations in the last 30 years in Massachusetts root somewhere back to Pat Larkin. So
My name is Pat Larkin. I'm the program executive and deputy director of MassTech, and I run the Innovation Institute at MassTech. We founded the Innovation Institute about close to 15 years now, 2003 when it got enacted. And it really is about supporting growth, MassTech generally, and a dedicated effort around the Innovation Institute to support growth in our innovation economy. I've been in economic development since 1992, started as the Deputy Secretary of Tech Transfer and Defense Diversification in Weld 1, so that was some time ago. And it was pretty clear to me, having been on that line agency at economic development for about a year and a half, that things got pretty political on that 21st floor on Ashburton Street in Boston. And I went to work for what we call a quasi-governmental organization, MassTech. And we are that agent of the state that really does work at the nexus of government, academia, and industry to try to look over the horizon and understand what's happening in the economy and try to be opportunistic on the part of the state to make things happen. And so that's what the Innovation Institute does. We have a number of tools and instruments that we do it. We start with our own human capital, people that work projects in the field and engage with the ecosystem. We have some research capacity that allows us to take an objective view at the economy, not to take the advocate's view that comes through the door every day and tells us where we ought to go and what we ought to do. We try to measure that with some objective analysis. We have some funding instruments, and the one that we're talking about today is called the R&D Fund at MassTech. We've created two programs under that fund called the Collaborative Research Matching Grant Program, which is the one that funded this award. And wanting to even get deeper into the ecosystem, we created a second one called the Tech and Innovation Ecosystem Support Program. I've got my portfolio manager that runs our R&D fund with us, Sharon Wall. Sharon, raise your hand there. I think the only thing that I can share as we get back to the program is we don't give anybody anything. You know, we respond to the marketplace. We try to understand what opportunities are. I almost feel as though we're like public sector venture folks. We look for people who are really adding real value, understand their problems, understand their challenges, and are creating economic impact in our environment. And I can tell you, going right back to 2003, Jim has been a poster child of that. You know, it's very difficult many times to go into a university environment and find researchers who can think beyond their own research agendas and understand the nexus between our dollars. When you look at Massachusetts, there are billions of dollars that get invested in the Commonwealth for its research enterprise from industry, from the federal government, from elsewhere. Our program differentiates itself on one point, and that is, yeah, we'll give the university $1, but we're not interested in your research agenda as much as we're interested in your relationships with industry and your ability to grow clusters and an economy. And so we differentiate it that way, and they can get their other money from other sources. And we're grateful for the work that Jim does. We're grateful for the work that Justin does, because these are the types of real pockets of innovation and activity that we look for, and we turn the challenges over to them.
Thank you, Pat. That's great. So we're going to do a little discussion. I'll go back and forth a bit, and we're going to have plenty of time for questions, and we hope we get a lively discussion here. Just for you, those of you in the audience, just so you know, that we are being streamed and recorded. There'll be a microphone. So if you ask a question, you're going out to the internet. So just want to tell you that, which is great, but behave. So I'm going to ask Jim to talk a little bit about Metalens and give us the background on what it was. I have to tell you, as most of you guys know, or you may not know, I grew up locally, and I have a real interest in economic development and a legal background around, very interested in policy and pretty versed and can navigate my way around policy. The science is amazing to me, and I'm learning every day. I'm at this almost 5 years now at the BIC, and I get to see amazing stuff that is constantly blowing my mind. And this is a great example, but I'm a little slow sometimes. So I'll tell you, Justin came charged up one day telling me he's got metal lenses, and I leave and I'm like, metal lenses? How are they doing metal lenses? And I start Googling. Yeah, I'm like, oh, not metal lenses, metal lenses. Okay, so Google can teach me a few things, but I've dug into this since that first opening conversation. It's totally fascinating. So maybe Jim, you can just give a little background on meta lenses and make sure everyone's grounded and no one misses that like me.
Absolutely. So when you think about optics, we've been doing it the same way for hundreds of years. Right. So you remember back to your grade school history textbooks, and that dates all of us because the kids don't have books anymore, it turns out, right? But when you go back to the page and you see a picture of Galileo, right, with his telescope, you're thinking, wow, he's an old guy, right? And that was a long time ago. And it's amazing that the same principles that Galileo used to build the telescope are still the ones that we use to focus light, the ones in these eyeglasses, right? So you've got, these aren't as bulky as they used to be before I had LASIK, but you had fairly bulky lenses, right? And you rely on the curvature of the surface and different thicknesses of that glass to focus light or manipulate it in other ways. And it really hasn't changed. And it started to change about maybe 15 or 20 years ago in the labs, right? In the optical physics. When people figured out maybe there's a better way of manipulating light. And the way they do that is to make very small features that sit on a flat surface. And so these features are maybe 100, 150 nanometers wide. They may be a micron tall. If you look on the screen, you'll see them go by. And if you arrange them properly and you control the size and the shape and the composition, they can do all the job of Galileo's lenses. But they do it in a thickness that's 1/100th that of a human hair. Right? So pretty amazing, right? So in addition to the miniaturization, you can do many things in a single lens, right? So if you pull out your iPhone and you look at these big bumps on the back, right? Why are those big bumps, right? They're not a single lens. There are 5 lenses in that train because each of those lenses has to be combined to perform a separate function. If you drive a Tesla, right, they do optical navigation systems. And if you go into their sensors, they've got 7 lenses, 8 lenses lined up with each of those lenses performing a different function. So that's not good, right? It makes for a large, bulky system. It leads to reliability issues. And it certainly isn't miniaturization when each of those is a big lens to begin with. And so what the Metalens technology allows you to do is to shrink all those lenses down. Again, think about a hair sitting on a wafer. That's it, and doing the function of many lenses. Really cool physics, right? The problem that had existed was being able to fabricate those lenses was really complex. There's an example of what those structures look like. Typically you would use the semiconductor wafer process, and it took a day, maybe longer. Horrendously expensive. So I loved your analogy with popular mechanics. I am certain if you go back in popular mechanics, you'll see an issue on metal lenses. And I'm certain that the optics people read that image and felt the same frustration as Justin. this looks great, right? Because if we can miniaturize optics, think about what you can do with that, right? One, you can make the bumps go away in your iPhone, right? So somewhat interesting, but maybe not the most critical challenge we're facing. You can build better LiDAR, right? You can take focusing, polarization, and phase and put them all in a single lens. Put that lens on the end of an endoscope, and now you've got a much better device, right, to image the human body, right? Put it in microscopes, right? If you're the military, right, you like to fly things, and you don't like to pay for a lot of weight, and you want them to be really efficient and accurate, right? So you're going to put them in harm's way. But if they perform, they do wonderful things. In night vision, right? You ever seen the night vision goggles? Huge, right? Real problem for the military. They drain power. Our soldiers go to war armed with batteries, right? Because they have to power everything they use. And some of that is due to the electronics, and in night vision, it's signal processing that has to happen in the goggles. If you use the right set of meta lenses, you can take an IR image, convert it right to visible image, not do any signal processing. It reduces everything. You guys have seen a lot about augmented and virtual reality, right? That's coming. It's coming. It's coming, right? One of the reasons it's been coming and not here is the eye box, right? Where you see the image in your lenses is too small to be interesting to people, right? If you can bend light in a better way, build a more efficient waveguide, you can fill that entire lens, the entire eye box, right, with an image. And you make it lighter, right, reduce its power, becomes more useful to you. And so the point is that by rethinking optics, you really do open up an entire new box in terms of commercial opportunities. And in Massachusetts, when you think about lasers, you think about photonics, you think about defense, you think about medical imaging, it's all here, right? As far as the durability aspect of it, some of the first people to come to us when they saw this technology were the defense companies, right? For a lot of the reasons that we talked about. Right? Can you make a durable lens? Can we put a lot of power through it? Can we fly it around? Right? Well, we think so. We think we can put it up in space. We think it'll be okay. And this partnership is going to do two things. The innovation out of our group was to get away from the traditional approach to making metal lenses. Put it in a fab, spend a day doing it, costs an enormous amount of money to do it that way. Right? So if I take this and I have DRAM or I have transistors sitting on it, a 300 millimeter wafer is worth probably $75,000. You don't see it in the cost of your computers because the individual chips are so small, they can put a ton of them right on the lens, on a wafer. With optics, everything's bigger, right? And what you're paying for in the semiconductor industry is the area over which you're building the device. And so it works economically in the semiconductor industry. As soon as you make that footprint big, no longer works economically. I can get rid of this bump on the cell phone, but if your cell phone goes from $1,000 to $50,000, you're probably not very interested. Right? So to make this work, we have to rethink the manufacturing process, right? And so this is an example of about 1,000 metal lenses sitting on a wafer. They're 4 millimeters. We make this in about 2 minutes. Okay. And the way that we do it is essentially through a stamping process, right? So what we do is we make the pattern for it. So yes, we can abandon the semiconductor industry. We go in and we make the first copy in a traditional fab line. We then make copies of that copies in a polymer, and then we use that polymer to just print the devices. So by making one wafer in a semiconductor platform, we can make 100,000, 200,000, 1 million devices. Right now, this expensive wafer gets amortized, completely over so many devices that does not even become a significant part of the problem anymore, right? And so what you're looking at here, again, is a wafer full of 1,000 lenses. What you're mostly looking at is the glass that those lenses are sitting on, right? The individual features are really too small to see, with an optical microscope. You've got to go in and use a scanning electron microscope to find them. And so that's the plan, right? Stamp, 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 stamp. And so to make that happen, again, you've got to get to manufacturing. You've got testing, and you've got to get to durability. And so the tools that we use, they're not completely unique, right? They're used in other spaces. They're beginning to have applications in optics and other ways to approach metal lenses that still involve semiconductor processing, but they're out there. But they're not accessible, right? So as Pat knows, at UMass, we have a history of trying to build facilities that advance manufacturing and not just keeping them internally to the academics, but opening them up. And so one of the investments here is to bring a tool in that's going to allow us to produce these and open it up to companies, open up the technology, make it affordable. And to assist in doing that, we also have a characterization facility. And that's what this grant is going to fund in Massachusetts. Because right now, Vince spends time in Austria, right, when we have to scale. Probably too much time. Right? He also has to spend time, or could spend time, in Asia, in China, Taiwan. Those places are beginning to put these installations in place, right? Good manufacturers, and Justin will speak to the defense part of this, right? When we start to talk about critical technologies, man, it's kind of nice to keep those on shore, right? And right now, we really don't have the capacity to do that. And that's one of the reasons this investment is so important, right? It begins to reshore that technology. And the other difference is when you build a semiconductor fab, they're building one at Micron now, $70 billion. Enormously expensive. We can build a facility for the fabrication of optics in a relatively small footprint for tens of millions, maybe 100 million, right? You can locate that in Massachusetts. I don't think Massachusetts is going to give us 100 billion to build a semiconductor fab.
You could ask really nice.
We could ask really, really nicely. Very nice, right? But by putting that right in this ecosystem, where the lasers, where the photonics, and we remember the first photonics rush, these are very useful in telecom, right? So all those industries still exist. And so there really is a natural ecosystem for metal lenses. We talked about the optical physics that preceded all of this. And Federico Capasso of Harvard is one of the most famous folks in the world around lenses, right? So it's here. Right? We've got Springfield Technical Community College that has a laser and photonics program, right? You're going to need all segments of the workforce here. And so in addition to thinking about the investment in tools and characterization facilities, an important part of this grant is connecting the students, right? Educating people how to do the manufacturing, get them on the shop floor, you know, at this community college and the bachelor's level, raising that next generation of folks to do the optical physics and manufacturing technology, maybe at the PhD level. And so there's straight connectivity, right through the education system here. And the other thing that's nice about this is when we think about designing programs for K through 12, right, you got to have something that's visually interesting. Right? I can't show you the AR, VR waveguides that we're doing with partners because they're still in development. They won't let us do it. But, you know, that's going to be a pretty easy connection for the kids. Here's your old crappy goggles, right? Here's your really nice new ones. My video games just got much better, right? So that's the way we think about it. And I'll stop there. Justin, chime in here.
Cool. Yeah, so I think our part's probably a little bit less interesting than all of the groundbreaking stuff that Jim's doing, but I think it's on the same order of magnitude as important there. You know, so Jim touched on a couple key points I think that are worthy about chatting about here. So when you start with any new technology at all, nobody's good at it, right? It's new. There's a reason that no one's doing it. It's because it's new. And for any company to come and say, I'm going to go start getting into metal lenses, you can be the most proficient precision optics company in the world, somebody that just won an NSF grant for a really good idea, you know, working out of their garage until they get a bigger area or somewhere in the middle there. There is no way to scale your operation. Where are you going to hire people that know how to work on these problems? Where are you going to get the equipment that is going to allow you to not spend $1 million trying to try something new and get your feet wet? And for companies, if you have to go buy a piece of equipment that is, you know, 7 figures or larger, you know, if you're talking about getting something to do manufacturing there, there's very few companies, if any, in the world that are really willing to take that on because you have a risk of personnel and you have a risk of equipment and technology there. So if we had only taken this project on from the standpoint of let's solve a really hard technical problem, I think it would have missed the boat. And so, part of the reason that we thought that this would be a really good idea is EMA is not a manufacturer of giant amounts of technology and equipment and things like that. We're pretty good at being the step before you get it to a large DoD contractor that's going to field thousands and thousands of satellites there, right? That's the role that we play in all of this. People that are going to come to us are very likely going to be people that specialize in studying these things, like postdocs, people that are going to come from programs that need universities. And that was really where Jim and I kind of thought that this would be a really interesting project to propose because, his group, Jim and Vince and their whole group had already kind of figured out something pretty cool. And, around here, I get a lot of, a lot of chuckles that the stuff that EMA does is like the coolest things in the world. And I think so. I think what we do is really awesome. But when my ears perk up at stuff other people are doing, I'm like, wow, this really has something. And that certainly happened here. So by combining the ability to train people that are not yet in the workforce on this, so these are your students, people learning to decide what they're doing for a career, to taking people that are going to operate new types of equipment, right? So if you want to go into, this lab that Jim's building when it's done, I mean, he'll help you with it, but at some point you got to be able to do it yourself. And so having that hands-on teaching and learning there is really going to give you the ability to try something new, right? When you prototype something, one of the reasons that EMA has been successful is that we live on the edge of the research enterprise where people spend a lot of money trying stuff that's probably not going to work. I mean, that's just the way science is more stuff doesn't work than does. And it's great as long as you learn something from it and you can afford to keep trying. That's the pay-to-play model. And so when you pair simulation, which is kind of EMA's heritage, where you can design at your desk. And so our type of simulation is taking external environments, so the space and complicated, they call them contested electromagnetic environments, things like lightning and being in front of radars, things with electromagnetic energy in them. We're able to translate that down to what are your computers going to see? What are these lenses going to be exposed to? And if we do testing, we can learn what the limits of a particular design are. Then we can put it in space, we can put it underwater, we can put it on a boat or a train or in a car and understand, are we ever going to hit that limit? And if we do hit that limit, what ways can I tweak my design without having to go back to fab something new? And that's really fun because we get to not have to, kind of spend our time trying to deal with the politics of, I think Pat said it really well, the politics of having to justify to a company that's really interested in optics. I mean, we have a gigantic DoD contractor here in Pittsfield in General Dynamics, and they build undersea submarines that shoot nuclear warheads. I mean, that is what they do, and that's incredibly complicated. And that is one small branch of the all greater big GD. And then you have the Raytheons and the Lockheeds, and you have all the tech companies that are under the radar doing stuff. Apple sells things to the Department of Defense that not a lot of people are aware of. And what they require is, if I'm going to invest my money in it, you need to prove to me that you have done risk reduction and that I'm not going to be in a total waste of time. They are very okay if you fail, provided that you have an answer that's in waiting there. And without the ability to do simulations and iterate on things quickly, you're going to get stuck in a lab forever. And so what I think I'm most excited about in this project is learning what knobs that you can turn on a design and what those knobs actually do, because I don't think anybody really knows that. We know how to, Jim's process will build something, and if I change this little piece of an ingredient over here, did I add 10 years to my space survivability? I don't know. Did you? And that's going to be something that none of us know the answers to. And it's going to be really kind of a fun part for all of us to learn as we go forward.
Thanks, Justin. I'm going to pass it over to Pat. Pat, something your office publishes annually, which I read annually, is the report on the innovation ecosystems in Massachusetts. And there's a lot in there about where we rank in key sectors across the nation. And not surprising to many in this room, we're killing it in a lot of categories. I mean, Massachusetts is by far, one of the most innovative states in and around key clusters. And like you said, it's sort of thoughtful investments, reading the market and reading the potential. So I want to like you to talk a little bit about, the way the Innovation Institute and the quasis read that and target their investments to clusters that have the opportunity to grow. I mean, we're built, by Deval Patrick made an investment in the life science, leveraging, hey, we got this great hospital system, these great academic institutions, leveraging the resources. And I think that's what's going on here. And maybe talk a little bit about leveraging existing things and sort of key investments that can.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. We kind of have an interesting design for economic development in Massachusetts. When you go to many states, they have an economic development department that manages, runs, and executes on all dimensions within economic development in those states. I think Connecticut's a good example of that. And most states go that way. In Massachusetts, we have what I call a distributed system. We have a network of economic development, what we call quasi-governmental organizations, us being probably one of the leading ones, but we have Clean Energy Center, we have the Life Sciences Center, you have the Mass Development Finance Agency, you have Mass Ventures, and the list goes on. And these are entities that kind of build competencies in certain disciplines, and they work together kind of in a coordinated fashion to try to address the opportunities that exist really in the ecosystem. So I think, Ben, when you ask the question, how does state government do this? It really is listening hard, building competencies and understandings and experience and benchmarking what's happened in different areas, but really listening hard in terms of what's going on in the ecosystem. There's one driver that state government kind of persists in all the administrations that I've been involved with. Number one, there's not a real strong ambition to try to make Boston and Cambridge better than they are. I mean, they've got these research institutions, and the Commonwealth can't really move the needle on what already exists there. We can on the edges, we can on helping with the environment and the bully pulpit and all of that, but there's a lot of capital in those places that are kind of driving. But when you start getting into the regions around the state, you have a realization that they're not benefiting at the same level. And you can see, Ben, in the analysis and the statistics that we put out, the rest of the state is artificially inflated by what goes on there, right? So what we try to do is to look at those pockets of competencies that exist around the state and try to reinforce the ecosystem and the ambitions that exist with the industry leaders and the academic leaders and the civic leaders that exist out there. And most of the administrations have done that very effectively. And all the tools and all the leverages that have been talked about here. Place-based investment. So you have neighborhoods and areas where people can grow, and facilities like the BIC. There's the talent investments, and Jim and Justin have talked about the importance of that for them to be successful in the greater ambitions of the sector that they are trying to grow. Other forms of capital to grow these firms. What the state does is listen and try to understand where the energy and the leadership, where the champions are out on the landscape for these initiatives, put a reasonableness factor in there. Are people thinking about it in a prudent way, and really support them where they can. I must say, we put dollars out. I'm walking through the back room and the resources that are made available for Justin to really do something in the Berkshires that wouldn't otherwise occur. If you could have gotten there on your own, it would have taken a lot longer, right, Justin?
That's a big if, yeah.
I mean, it is, so the state, you can't do that just because someone has a big idea and wants to do something. There has to be a demonstrated ability for those folks to perform. And I think what Jim and Justin represent together, what the university represents, what this community represents, the coalition that came around this through STIC and Berkshire Community College and others, the competencies that are being developed at the BIC through their manufacturing academy and others, that raises confidence. And yeah, we can put public investments there because it gets surrounded by other kinds of activities that can really grow it. I think the goal is critical mass and certain competencies where you can start feeding across each other and really start growing an economy. And I think that the Metalens story is one where people like Mike and others can try to study where these places are going and what types of firms would advantage themselves in proximity to what Justin's doing and what Jim's doing, and see if you can't aggregate a few of those firms in the region based on the talent that's spilling out of Justin's work and others. It's a long-term play to really build innovation economies. Leaders have to not be seduced by the big shiny objects and do the blocking and tackling that takes place, which is happening here, and it's happening in a number of other areas, both in this county and in regions around the state. So that's how we think about it. That's how I think about it. That's how we work the landscape. There's no silver bullet. There's no one that's entitled to get to where they want to be on things without doing the hard work of building enterprises and supporting the inputs that all of these enterprises need from talent, capital, business environment, and everything else to be successful.
I think you said something really interesting there, Pat, too, that I think maybe talking about it more would be fun. We in Pittsfield here had General Electric for a long time. And so that is the definition of an innovation ecosystem, right? They dropped all of these different branches of technology out here and the entire city grew around it. And then they left, and that's a different issue. But when you go to start something up in an area, do you look at the ability of the groups like Mike and what the city, the city's been a major supporter with, from Premier Tire back here as well, of enabling our ability to kind of grow, at least from an EMA standpoint. Do you look at the heritage of this city has demonstrated we could do it before? Is that a blueprint you look for?
There's no question. Each region has its own strength and its legacy strengths. And one of the reasons why we're very focused, for instance, in Pioneer Valley, to drive a new initiative around quantum computing is because of the marriage between that industry and the precision machining and the manufacturing base that exists in Pioneer Valley and through the I-91 corridor. Yeah, the legacy competencies and experience of a region are very much, it's in the woodwork. It's all part of it. We're not gonna, when you're on the East Coast and you're in coastal communities, you try to understand what the ocean economy is meant to growing their economies and how people grow and prosper in that environment. Yeah, I think in the Berkshires, there's been a tremendous legacy, capabilities that get carried on through families that, I look at what David's doing in his firms, this stuff, you can't make it up. It's there, and you build on that where you can.
Yeah, I think that's just an incredible way to look at it because, if you go to, so let's fast forward 10 years from now, we'll be 20, what was 10 years from now, 2034 or something, I don't even know. And this is all up and running. Yeah, right, exactly. And we're all successful here. We hit check every box. This is a great success. And I always try to look at what is this going to look like? What is it where like great EMA can test lenses and we can do simulations. That's cool for us, and you can manufacture it and go to Amherst there. But that is like such a very small, like ball pen point piece of influence on the whole ecosystem there. And the game is how do you spread it there? And so I think if we do our jobs right, what that picture in 10 years is going to look like is people are going to find it convenient to be somewhere around Amherst and somewhere around Pittsfield because of what we've done here. And that is when you get the flywheel effect, right? Where You know, you have some company come out here because it's easy to come over to the BIC and sit here and take phone calls and have meetings and have a good storefront, and EMA's lab is right here, and, you know, we can help you figure some stuff out. And then you're like, all right, I can call Jim and I know Vince, and we can go out there and we can go, you know, try this crazy idea out. And you can do all that in a day, right? Amherst is basically an hour from here, and it's not a bad drive. Don't do it in the wintertime, but it's not a bad drive down Route 9 there to get over there. And do it in the fall, it's much better. We're all Berkshire, most of us are Berkshire County folks here. But that's the goal with this, right? You know, it's hard to not kind of be seduced by the idea of, we have all of this precision manufacturing in the optics industry already in Massachusetts. And I don't know if I coined it or stole it, maybe I read it somewhere, but the term economic gravity is very relevant here, right? So the state has been tilted. So this is Boston, this is Western Mass for a very long time. And when you get economic gravity, that scale starts to shift. And once you tilt it in one direction, the stuff from the west starts coming east, or the east starts coming west out here. My compass going the wrong direction there. But from Boston starts coming to Massachusetts out here to Western Mass. And we're no longer the grandson of Springfield that's somewhere out in the woods over here. You know, I went to UMass-Amherst for college, and I've got a lot of friends that stayed out in that area, and they still joke. I mean, this is, you know, many years after college now, that you live where? I'm like, come on, guys, really? There's a whole area out here that's west of Springfield, and this is how I get to one, kind of win those arguments and have kind of well, now you know where we are, because Apple put up a research facility out here. That's not as crazy as it sounds.
I wanted to follow up on a point that Pat made that I think is really important. I mean, when you look around, the legacy of the precision machining, advanced manufacturing in Western and Central Mass is amazing, right? And it's all west of Worcester, really. Yeah. And so, just as one example, we recently hired into Mirius, which is a startup company doing Metalenses. Our first hire that's going to look at the manufacturing and the process flow. And he's got 20 years experience coming out of one of those legacy industries, and the industry that he was in is maturing and moving. He's fantastic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So he came to us and he's like, wow, okay.
That's a great story.
Plugging right in. So
yeah,
it's all about, you know, we have the talent. It's about keeping the talent ahead of the industries that are moving.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. And it's an incredible resource. I mean, it's beautiful out here, right? Pat, I know you got a place on the lake here, a place notice. The natural resources are amazing. It's the human capital.
Yeah.
Right. If we can find ways to redeploy, retrain, take advantage of that. And that's in the manufacturing space. Then Justin spoke to ecosystems, right? The photonics ecosystem is in Massachusetts. The laser ecosystem is in Massachusetts. Telecom is here. Medical imaging. Right. And so it's not hard to imagine those clusters building naturally when it's an hour from here to Pittsfield, from Amherst, it's an hour and a half to Boston. That's not a hard gap to bridge, and you're not going to manufacture in Boston. You're just not. You're not going to manufacture inside of 128. Yeah. You might in Shrewsbury, right? But you still have the connectivity, and the industries are going to benefit from these innovations. So they're right there. And when they relate to security, there's an additional advantage because they're domestic, right? So you've got this whole thing that's kind of ready to go. And I think what we're excited about is the opportunity to unlock some of that. And I also think you're going to start to see a flow of some of the talent out of Boston. I mean, I've got my two sons are both engineers. They're both living in Boston. They both have significant others. They're having a great time, right? No kids. Right. No, they want kids, and they're like, Dad, we got to move, you know. And so that is the economic reality for a whole class of professionals. And I think you're going to start to see them move, right? Which is another opportunity for us.
So I want to make sure we have a chance for our audience to chime in here. Jordan's in the back. He's got a microphone. He's going to come around. I see Doug Crane raising his hand. So Doug, can you start us off?
I'll just speak loudly. So in addition to
it's for the people joining remotely.
Okay, people joining remotely. I'll try not to use the wrong words.
No profanity. PG-13.
So I know that there's been a lot of investment in photonics and integrated photonics, and that Rochester is sort of a center of this as well. And then we've got a lot of activity over in over in Albany. And I just wanted to get your perspective on how it is that this activity here at the BIC sort of serves to connect, sort of what's going on essentially along Route 90.
I can comment on that a little bit. We work with SUNY Albany, right? When I was talking about making this one expensive, right, master, if you're on 90, then you drive towards the Northway, right? You pass State University of New York. It was at Albany. Now they call it something different, right? And you see huge buildings there. What those are is semiconductor fab pilot lines for the semiconductor industry, right? And they came about when IBM was making noise about staying in New York. New York essentially moved Semitech from Texas to Albany, right? But it left that investment and it built up a whole infrastructure. And what did that lead to, right? It led to the AMD fab being located not far from there, right? So it ends up being a really smart investment by New York. It's at a scale that was huge, but it paid off huge. Now you're going to get the Micron fab that's out west closer to Rochester, right? But you're right, there is a connectivity here, and it's in a couple of ways, right? One is just the natural technical partnerships and the fact that we can drive to SUNY Albany and work on cutting edge tools where we need them to make this one master, to make all the devices. Hugely important. We drive right by Justin when we do it. And New York is invested in silicon photonics, right? So, and they do have investments there. Our approach is quite a bit different in the way that we accomplish building the optics and reduce cost, right? But some of those markets cross over, and we do expect to have pretty good conversations with the technical folks there.
Yeah, I think in adding to that, the role that we play is we're kind of agnostic where the things are manufactured from, right? The same challenges are going to exist for new silicon wafer devices as they are for additively manufactured devices and everything in between. And so for us, the challenge is no different, right? You want to make a new device, you have to, before you can sell it, you have all your certifications and regulations you go to. And before you do that, you have to know if the end user is ever going to buy it. Why would you spend all that time and money to do it? And for the new semiconductor fabrications out there, they're making things smaller and they're putting more stuff on chips. That's just kind of the way the industry's been going for a long time. And when you deal with electromagnetics, you can only really get so small before electrons start to do funny things and they make their own paths that aren't supposed to be there. And being able, again, to simulate and demonstrate that it's not unique to specifically, the way that Jim's company and Jim's group is making metal lenses, right? If you're going to make lenses or optics, it's the same physics base. It's just how you build them and everything is kind of the secret sauce of the groups making them. But for us, it's directly applicable, and we certainly intend to try to use whatever gravity we have by what we're doing out here to bring more to continue doing that.
I mean,
But one of them is about the lens and the direction of the light. How does that work with the direction of light? I just don't understand that. When you look at it straight at a 90-degree angle, it's easy to understand how it propagates. But
right.
How do you deal with the light in different incident angles? How does that linearize and not distort the image? Is that something you
we'll bring Amir or Bobby out here to give you a full-blown lecture on the physics of metal lenses, right? So Amir, there's two primary groups or two leading groups in the country. One's at Harvard, and the other was at Caltech. Amir came from Caltech to UMass about 6 years ago. He does all our designs and I'll give you a really good lecture on that. But essentially what you're doing is you're controlling light instead of with curvature. Very small posts, right? And it's the interaction of those posts and the propagation of light through the posts that manipulate the wavefronts.
Okay,
so
that's what I thought is probably what you're doing. And
right.
So based on that, my second question is, does that mean that by slight changes in the height of those posts that essentially the output changes?
Yes, by the height, and by the position, and by the shape.
Okay, so how precise can you make those?
Incredibly precise, right? So again, the thickness is, 1/100th of a human hair, right? So the diameter of those posts is 1/1000th of a human, right? And your height comment is right on, right? Because that deals with how efficient the lenses become. So we talk about something called optical height, which is the height of the feature multiplied by its refractive index. Refractive index is how well that material bends light, right? So the higher refractive index material, right, the higher the post, the more efficient the lens. And in the simple focusing lens, you'll see one go by here, right? There's cylindrical posts that are arrayed on a surface, and then we manipulate their position, and we can control their spacing, and we control the wavelength that we're focusing for.
Okay.
Now, if we want to polarize the light, right? So if you take polarized sunglasses, right, you cross them, they go from light to dark, right?
Yeah.
So the way that people polarize light now is you do grid polarizers. So you wipe out half of the light going in one direction and half the light going in the other direction. You put them together, and you immediately lose 50% of your intensity because you're just blocking half the light. In the meta lenses, you can go from rods to ovals, right, or to other shapes. And then you look at the way that you're manipulating them. And now you get both phase and polarization. So you don't have to change the basic construct, you change the design. If you want to change the wavelength, you change the spacing and the diameter. Right, so you get all the degrees of freedom in optics without playing with multiple lenses, just by rearranging the size and shape of these posts.
And you have
It's a powerful technique.
You have software that simulates this process?
There are some commercial packages. Somebody like Amir will tell you all the reasons why the commercial packages, are inadequate. What he tends to do is draw, probably like you guys do. There are commercial packages that do parts of the equations really well, right? The standard equations, the governing physics, you can bring those together. It's how you extract what you need from the various commercial packages, recombine them, and fill in the blanks. That's the secret sauce of design. So all these guys write code between the commercial code. And it's how they stitch the engines that are available commercially together to get to the output.
All right, so the reason why I'm asking all this question is basically what I do, which is cryptography. So have you guys applied this to cryptography at all or no?
Cryptography?
Yeah.
You can.
Okay. So I have a project which is the next version of the work that we're doing, which is simulated quantum entanglement. And I like to do it with optics, and it seems like this is the direction. And so can you control the propagation on a portion of the wafer, and then you can do that all?
Yeah, well,
right?
the beautiful thing about these, the techniques that we apply is you can print them on sections of wafers if you want, right?
Wow.
So we can add an optical component right on top of another construct. And it's a
Wow.
pretty simple little stamping process, right? So if you have a device that's already functioning and you want a splitter, you want to change the phase, right? You want to couple two optical fibers, right? Those are the kinds of things. You want to change the shape of the wave.
And if you change
can
the
do those
frequency, if you change the frequency of the light, you can actually, during the timing, can you actually create general images? Okay.
I believe you, right? but I think what
Well,
you
I can simulate it through
when it comes
digitally, but
when it comes to design, I mean, again, they're making strides just like on the manufacturing side. Folks like Amir are leading the charge there. Just in terms of the cryptography and the information security, I mean, that's huge,
of course,
right?
yeah.
Authentication, and we're seeing that everywhere because everything can be corrupted.
Well, you could build the entire AES-256 right on the wafer. That way you get terahertz speed. So
Yeah. Well, there's a guy named Rob Niffenegger who's doing at UMass, who just came from MIT, Vince? Or Harvard, one or the other, right? Came from one of the groups there, and he's looking at exactly that, right? Building, meta optics within quantum chips, essentially, to make them more efficient. So I think you'd really enjoy a conversation with Rob.
yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. Yeah.
Happy to make that connection.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amit. We're back here. Joel.
Hi, Joel Williams from Photonics Media. I was wondering if you could speak to some of the technological capabilities that this investment, this facility will open up, specifically, having access to nano imprint lithography. What avenues of research is that going to open up for UMass and for Western Mass more broadly?
Right. So we have some nano imprint tools already, and we had an announcement out at UMass a little while ago that showed roll-to-roll imprinting, right? And so we use imprinting in our work. You can use that for microlens technologies. The dimensions are much bigger, their tolerances, things like, focusing light and, the advanced headlights and lighting systems in cars, right? So lower tech, you can do that roll to roll. We use quite a bit of imprinting in energy storage now, just to make, anodes and cathodes more efficient, and make supercapacitors perform a little bit better, right? And maybe one of the most dramatic impacts of nano imprinting was in DNA sequencing, right? So when you think about 23andMe, right, what that did for the cost of sequencing the whole human genome, they use imprinting, this stamping technique, right, to reduce that from, I forget the numbers, it was millions of dollars in several days, right, for one, and suddenly you put your sample in the mail, right, and it comes back with your genome and revealing all kinds of family secrets and all the other things that it did, right? But it became a very cost-effective technology. So it turns out you can't use those identical tools for the precision optics that we make, right? You have to change the way that you do the stamping. And so what this facility is going to do is to bring a tool that will do that into our facilities. And one of the key things that Pat recognized early on in our initial investments, and when we build the center, when we bring in high-end equipment at a university, it's absolutely necessary for the things that we do. But we don't use it all the time, right? We can't possibly fill it all the time, right? It's just not going to happen. So this tool is going to be $1 million plus, right? The roll-to-roll imprint tools run the same order. We have electron microscopes at the university that are $5 and $10 million, right? And so if you're a small company, you can't possibly buy all that, right? If you're a large company, you're going to go blue in the face convincing your manager to take a risk on a technology if you don't know it's going to work, right? And then you're going to say, hey, by the way, we've got to buy a $20 million tool set to see if it will work, and we don't know how to use it, right? So the wisdom of some of Pat's early investments in UMass were to make those tools accessible. It's part of the innovation gap. Even if I think it's going to work, if I can't convince my company to spend the money to show it's going to work, it doesn't get out of the lab. And so we started something early on called a voucher program for the smaller companies, right? And this is genius, right? Our tools are sitting there underutilized. In our company, Amirius Optics, we'll eventually buy the fabrication equipment we need because it's central to the business. But we need to use an SEM once in a while, a $5 million piece of equipment. We can't possibly afford that. So what the voucher project does is allows company to come in and use the facilities. Because they're outside of UMass, there has to be an industry rate. And at some point, there are larger companies, they'll just write the check if they see the value. But smaller companies can't do it. So the voucher program matches, right, the investment of the smaller companies in using the facilities. In fact, if you're under 50 people, it's a 75% discount, right? So suddenly, the small companies can come in and use the equipment that we're underutilizing at the university anyway. And let's face it, it's taxpayer dollars that'll put it in there. Oftentimes federal, but it's taxpayer dollars. This makes it accessible, and we've seen a real spike in the interest and use of those kinds of facilities. So you come out to UMass, you'll see the manufacturing demonstration facility for roll-to-roll and printed electronics. We're building the optics facility. You'll see that, and it's all accessible with training.
Rich. Oh, sorry. Let's go, Eric, and then we'll come back to you, Rich. I'm sorry.
As a science learner, like my friend Ben, never afraid to ask a stupid question. So as you started your first example with the fact that we're still wearing, 17th century technology on our faces, is there a human vision application for this technology?
There is. It depends how you define human vision right now. In the AR, VR waveguides, right, you get full color imaging. When you talk about Metalens, you asked about precision design, right? And their best designs are for a single wavelength, right? Because the efficiency changes as you do a wavelength spread, right? So in applications that involve machines, right? Machines love single wavelengths, right? Lasers love single wavelengths. All that stuff is perfect for meta lenses. When you look at full color imaging, using a Metalens. There's something called a chromatic aberration, right? Which is the different efficiencies at different wavelengths. Now, the Capasso's group and others are hard at work at solving that problem from a physics point of view, and they're almost there, right? It's so much better than it was a while ago. Our first markets aren't in imaging, multi-wavelength imaging. They're coming. And there are workarounds, right? You can do an RGB lens, you can recombine, you can do some signal processing. But there's so much out there for the single wavelength right now that by the time we're done implementing that, the physics will catch up with us and solve the chromatic aberrations. So that's a little further out, but it's coming. AR, VR waveguides, they handle the full color imaging, but they do it slightly differently. It's not really a Metalens, it's a waveguide. Right? They can design them for different color channels or a single color channel. So it works.
And a lot of the, so LiDAR is probably the best, most obvious use case there. So that's a radar that uses light. So pretty specific frequency. The lower the frequency, the further you can see, but the more sparse your data is going to come back. So, when you look at a Tesla or any autonomous vehicle, they have lots of different LiDAR sensors on there, all shooting at different frequencies. And without the whole physics lesson that would put everybody to sleep here on why that works, they don't really interfere with each other because it's light. They're not spitting out lots of energy radially around it. So if you're able to take 12 things that are very big and bulky and combine them down to one very small device there, now you can put many small devices there and you've got a form factor and order of magnitude increase in what you can do per unit area. So like human vision being, as Jim said there, I don't think the idea is to have, 4K TV, in your contact lenses in the near future, although that would be cool. My kids would love it. I think more appropriately, it's taking outside data and bringing it in over a very small area, but without reducing accuracy, right? If you take a large area of anything and you try to bring in a lot of data, you're going to get a lot of data you don't want in it there. And so Jim's point, I think, to the machines liking very single frequencies there, you're going to get to receive a frequency not in light. You're going to get a lot of other stuff with it there that makes it noisy, and then you get signal processing and everything gets complicated. So I think the most obvious use case there is the spitting of very direct light. So that's directed energy for the military. That is all the rage right now. If you want to see some cool stuff, they have the AFRL in Albuquerque has a system where they fly drones and they shoot them down with lasers, and it is cool. It's as a scientist, it's cool to see that thing go off, and it's scary, but I mean, that's going to be coming in outer space, and there, the Space Force was kind of a name that got kind of dragged through the mud a little bit in the industry there, but they're making huge investments in installing really high fidelity RF links, right? So they need energy to penetrate through the ionosphere, which has all sorts of floating particulates in it there that will scatter electromagnetic energy, but light does pretty well going through it.
So Justin mentioned the LiDAR application. You can think about that as terrain mapping, right? In some respects, right? I need to know exactly what's around and where, and right. If you've got your Tesla that already weighs, 2 tons because of the battery system anyway, right? Maybe you could argue that the bulk of LiDAR, you can live with it. Maybe it's a reliability problem. It's a cost problem, but you can live with it. But how many of you guys see drones flying around, right? And they're commercial drones, military drones, mapping, geolocation, figuring out where we are. That's what we call a SWAP problem: size, weight, and power. Right? The amount of time the drone can stay in the air, right? The distance it can fly, the utility of it is all driven by what it weighs. So there are very, important use cases where miniaturization is beyond just convenience, right? It ends up being absolutely enabling. So that's one example.
Yeah, hi, Rich Peters, retired chief scientist over here at SABIC, GE Plastics, and also working for the Manufacturing Academy as an instructor.
Oh, perfect.
Couple questions. That looks like polycarbonate. It's not.
No, that's glass. Yeah.
It's glass.
That's glass.
Okay, I was wondering about the manufacturing base here in Berkshire County. I mean, you mentioned roll to roll. We have, a lot of paper industry that's roll to roll, Intrapid does roll to roll. We also have a lot of injection molding side. So I wonder if that stamp piece, you put that into glass, could you also take that stamp piece and injection mold it, as an insert into an injection mold and maintain the integrity of that?
Yeah, well, you actually asked a very nice question there.
Thank you.
So I'll have to buy you a beer later, right? So the materials that we use in these lenses, they're metal oxides, right? So this is titanium because it's transparent, right? It's high refractive index, and we stamp it and we shape it. So zirconia is another metal oxide, right? And we can make nanoparticles of it. We can put it in our resins. We can stamp it, right? So what is zirconia, right? So laboratory made diamonds, right? That's zirconia. Pretty hard stuff. So what we did a number of years ago with partners in Denmark was use essentially the same technology and to imprint a master for structural color in zirconia that was sitting on a stainless steel insert. And pretty large toy manufacturer in Denmark, won't tell you who it is, but if you, not a big secret, right? Dropped that in their injection molding machine and ran it for 115,000 cycles. No problem at all. Right, so it's an amplification of advances like this. We're using it for optics, but you can change the material set, right? And again, I think we can make really interesting mold inserts for injection molding for very small dimensions that will take the pressure, will take the heat, and just laugh at it, right? And so the cycle times are pretty impressive. So I'm happy to have that conversation because it's on our list of things to get to, right? To look at that. We actually wrote a paper on it. I can send it.
Yeah, one other question is, you have, I mean, these lenses, I mean, it looks like one of the things with like solar panels, they've been trying to increase the surface area of the absorption of the light, right?
Yeah.
I mean, with this lens, it's metal lens. I mean, the surface area is tremendous, right? So could you make super high concentrated absorption of photons for solar panels?
Yes,
And like just
right.
blow the energy.
Might actually blow them up though.
You
Yeah,
might
might
fire
actually
them,
blow
yeah.
them up, yeah.
No, but you're right, right? So the concept is you got a lot of solar panel, everything's doing the work. You're not collecting as much light as you like. Why not reduce the active area and just use cheap optics to focus more light, right? So you're collecting it from a larger area, bringing it to a point, and then you're spending much less money, right? Fabricating the active area of that solar array. The answer is yes.
Yeah, so we could take our injection molding industry, take some of these inserts and create solar panels that are just super collectors.
You
basically.
absolutely could.
And make them a lot smaller, right? I have solar on my house and my entire roof is solar panels. And I don't mind the look of it there, but if you could tell me that these could be little frisbee sized discs on there and they're the equivalent of a 10 kilowatt system, that's significant because think of all the other places you can put them, you know?
I've got a question. Super great discussion. Glad to have you guys here. So I'm a computer scientist background, patent attorney, and in the AI blockchain software space, namely. But I'm excited about the concept of like AI empowered meta lenses and maybe glasses of the future. And I was looking to you to maybe look in your crystal ball as to where you might see this technology going. And I love to see the fusion of lots of different types of technologies. And I think this is a great spot for a fusion of cool software meeting optics.
I think you're right. I mean, a lot of the visual experience, right? When you think about the input to AR, VR, right? Sorts of environments that can be AI enabled. So kind of manufacturing, right? And use cases and just learning better designs of lenses, some machine learning and AI feedback. And, we talk about the optical physicists, right? Solving these problems and getting to a design, but the refinement of those designs, I can certainly see being AI driven. And Mitch, maybe you thought about that more than I have. But yeah, there's obviously going to be a role.
Yeah, and AI right now in its current form is best at optimizing, right? Taking big data sets and learning patterns by ones that we've identified as humans and then saying, well, if you identified these two, this is probably also there and making sense of big data sets there. So, I mean, if you think of the different ways that Jim and his group here can make metal lenses, I would wager that AI would be pretty powerful there in the not too distant future at new use cases that are somewhere in between things that have been tried, right? I mean, training your data sets, that's the idea. But blockchain's an interesting one because blockchain and security are kind of hand in hand, right? There, you use that because it's immutable, you can never change it. And things like getting access to data on the blockchain through secure means, maybe is the right way to put that, are pretty intriguing here. I wouldn't say that at least as far as I'm aware, I don't think there's any, I don't think the technology's there, but for passwords and security and things like that, having a way to manipulate light a certain way, like I'm talking about the Matrix and Minority Report, where you're scanning your retina and stuff like that. That's probably a little bit further down the down the road a little bit there, but this is certainly a building block for it, I think.
Just want to go to the back. I mean, Linda's been itching.
Thank you. I'm fascinated by the science, and I'm so proud of everything Justin's accomplished. Mike and I remember when we were standing with you and you claimed you were going to build an empire, and you're doing it. I'll never forget that.
Can't run from it.
I have a new role now, though. I'm at Berkshire Community College doing workforce development. And one of you said something about keeping the talent ahead of the industry. And so thinking about Berkshire Community College and the opportunity for the Berkshires to be part of this incredible innovation, what do we need to do to be ready to educate the people of the Berkshires so they can work for you, Justin, and for all the other industries that might sprout because of this amazing work that you're doing?
That was one of the first conversations that we had when we kind of started putting this together. And actually, Pat was a big advocate for making sure that we had a good answer to that question. So we kind of know where we wanted to go with it there. And it's getting their hands dirty very early and very often, I think, is the way that I would phrase it there. It's a very perfect parallel to the general area the DMA works in, right? We work in electromagnetic effects. It's combined system effects. It is, you can't know if something's going to work until you put it all together, and it's a really, really serious problem. But they don't teach electromagnetic effects as a major, right? You have to acquire it through osmosis over a lot of years or something like that. I'm not even sure how you really get good at it. And this is an area that we have an opportunity to start and do this correctly, where if you're going to manufacture, metal lenses and you're going to work at a company that's doing it, it's really easy to go out and look at the manufacturing academy and some of the other areas that are taking people that are either in the workforce or going to be in the workforce and saying, what skills does the industry need and where are they deficient in? And then driving the curriculum as the wedge right in between those two to kind of bridge it there. And, when I kind of think back to what got me interested in science, I had the opportunity to get my hands dirty when I was in college, and I saw that engineering isn't all, building rockets and blowing things up. It's a lot of block and tackling, to use Pat's language there, to sit down and roll your sleeves up and figure out the problem and ask hard questions and be inquisitive. And you can't do that in a classroom. It's just, you have to, you're graded as you should be. I'm a believer in that style of the education system there, but you don't really see the eyes light up and the glimmer kind of get in there until you're able to see the use. Like, I'm sure all of us at some way, shape, or form took algebra, and everybody's like, what am I going to use algebra for in, the slope of a line? And that's like, it's then you see the applications of it, and it just becomes part of your day to day, right? And so I think the role that I would hope that BCC is able to take, and I think that's one that we're hopeful it'll take, is working with us as we get to learn what more is out there. So there are companies doing stuff that we're working on getting in touch with and bringing into the fold here. And they're going to have ideas that we haven't even talked about yet and stuff that they're trying to do. And if we're the only location in Massachusetts that has the ability to adapt a curriculum to what the industry needs, then they're going to come here. And I think that's what we want.
And I think another thing you mentioned is you've got programs in advanced manufacturing, maybe additive manufacturing. I think the other thing that an initiative like this can do is it can teach the kids that manufacturing can be exciting. It can be interesting, right? And so one of the nice things, some of the science that we do, it's hard to explain, hard to show the impact in a one-day visit by high school students. But the advantage of this technology, Defense does demos all the time, right? We make lenses in 2 or 3 minutes, right? So you can bring a student in, you can show them what it's going to do, you can make the lens, and then it works, right? And it looks interesting. And particularly if we can start to do, if we can get our AR, VR waveguides released, right? We can print the glasses, they can snap it into a pair of smart, snap the lens into a pair of smart glasses. Oh, I get it. right? I think that's one of the challenges with manufacturing. It's not that they can't do it. It's not that the economic opportunities aren't there. You got to make them want to do it.
So, thank you, Linda. So we got a lot more food and drink, and hopefully people will stick around. But I do want to take one more question so we can wrap this portion up and then hang out and keep going. But Thomas has got one here, so we got a lot of scientists in the room tonight.
Great presentation, and a couple of questions for Justin. This is a cutting-edge technology, and there are a lot of unknowns. What is the timeline to actually come out with a demonstration of what a capability the company is able to make? And then two, what is the roadmap of other products that you're thinking about?
So to take the first one, just in the order they came in there, we kind of build this as a 3-year project, and Sharon is really trying to make it a 2-year project. So we're trying to help her out there to get it done quickly. No, I'm just kidding. So for us to get everything up and running, it's probably 2.5 years, I think is the number. It'll probably end up being closer to 3 years before we're good enough at doing the whole suite of things, to be able to say that we're commercially ready to take on anything that you can throw at us. And we're taking a blueprint from how we've built Siri already, where I drive Brian nuts and give him 0 requirements for the stuff we have to do. And I'm like, we have this solar cell and they want to make it see if it blows up. And they're like, and he's like, that's all I get. And then we just roll the sleeves up and engineer it there. And that's, unfortunately, that's really how we're going to have to do this, because there's no standards, because this is new. There's no requirements. There's no certifications. So my previous employer, Lightning Technologies, did this, and so I'm kind of influenced by it, with the way that you certify airplanes against lightning. Like, all of the rules and all the ways that you do testing that the entire world uses came out of that company, the vast majority of it, at least. And so if we're going to be kind of taking all of that on, yeah, that's quite an undertaking. I'm not going to say that in one day we're going to do it, but the way that we've kind of staggered this project is we're building it incrementally. So we're going to have proton capabilities this year, which is, there's no commercial research facilities in the US to do that. They have not. You can't shoot protons at anything. To get to high energies, they're really, really big and really expensive. And this is like a gigantic refrigerator. I'm not even sure we're really ready to install it if it came in right now, but that's the fun part of the job, right? Is to try to figure that stuff out and take the
never
money
told
out.
us any of this.
He will when he comes back with the installation costs. So I want to I know there's beer and wine, so I want to make a very small comment from the manufacturing perspective on your question. So Vince and I have conversations pretty much every week. We had a really nice one today, but they can use it now. They want it now. And the question comes, how long is it going to take you to pilot? And then how long is it going to take you to get the production scale? We can pilot pretty fast, but there's a manufacturing capability gap, right, that is not there yet. And we need to move. We need to move fast, right? Because they're building the facilities in China, right? We get approached by those people, hey, do you want to help us out and help us implement the technology? And we're like,
So how do you address that, Jim? That capability?
They start making the investment now, all right? Because the lead times are specialized tools.
Yeah.
There's a year lead time. You have to install.
And are you
them.
building that capability within your own firm?
We plan to, yeah. So we just finished our seed round. It oversubscribed. We're going right back out for the Series A because we can't answer that question well.
Yeah.
We can go and borrow the production tools, and that's why he goes to
You
Europe.
know of our MMAP program, right? Where you can apply for, grants for production capabilities. We can talk about that one offline. It's not in the same neighborhood of, it's not $1 million program, but you can get a piece of equipment.
Yeah, but every little bit helps, and LFR's running his program, all right? So, and there is a workforce development angle that goes along with the installation of facilities, but it really is critical because Asia takes a different approach. China takes a very different approach. We know it's coming, we'll build it now, and then we'll wait. Government will pay us to wait. But when that switch gets turned, turn on the lights and go. We take a different approach, right? We're going to wait until the market's here. Oh, it's going to take 1.5 years to build a facility. What are your customers doing? The defense customers won't go there because they can't, but the commercial customers will. So it's a really interesting nexus for the technology, right? You got to make those early investments. And I think what we're doing with you guys is critical to demonstrate the capabilities and put those research level facilities in process. But if you're going to capture this as an economic advantage for the US, we got to put in the physical facilities. It's just not going to happen. It's going to be big screen TVs all over, invented in the US, made in Korea, Japan, and now that's getting too expensive. It's made in Malaysia. Yep. Do I envision? We haven't gotten that far. The neural networks, I'm sure people are thinking about it. The what? Oh, current. Oh, yeah, yeah.
I'm feeling he's got a couple more questions over beer. He might go.
Beer's out there. Billion's a good number. It's a better number if we're selling them for $10 each. Yeah.
So I think one of the roles of the BIC is, is to try to build excitement and understanding, and hopefully we built some understanding and people's wheels are spinning about how they might want to get involved. And I'm going to venture to say we built some excitement around this. So maybe it's time for beer. So to our panelists, thank you so much. This is amazing. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us.